Hello, and welcome to ReallyBigHat. My name is Jared, and this is a new series where I am going to be building some commander decks for Magic the Gathering. Since this is a new series that I'm trying out, I decided I would start at the beginning, as it were, and build what is essentially a Precon. It's a custom Precon. It is at a Precon power level, and it is headed by Kwain. It is essentially a life gain / pillow fort / group hug deck, and it is a lot of fun to play, as a good Precon should be. So without further ado, let's talk about some of the pieces. First up, we have Kwain himself. He is a 2-mana, white and blue. He is a 1/3, and he can tap, and then each player may draw a card, and then each player who drew a card this way gains 1 life. So Kwain himself has positives and negatives baked right in. He is card draw and life gain, all in one convenient package, the caveat being that he's also giving that to your opponents. This deck tries to use that to its advantage as much as possible, with certain pieces that we'll get into later, and that plays into the quote-unquote group hug element of the deck as well. The idea is to lull your opponents into a false sense of security by being the one giving out cards and life until you're ready to take the win. Moving right along, in the deck building process, I have tried to remain as faithful to what you would find in a Precon that Wizards produced as I possibly can. And in that vein, I have also included a alternative commander / sub-commander in the deck. And that is Will, Scion of Peace. Will costs 3 mana, 1 a white and a blue, and he is a 2/4. He also has Vigilance and the ability to tap, and then spells you cast this turn that are white and or blue cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn, and you can activate that only at sorcery speed. Will makes an excellent sub-commander with Kwain as the commander, because if they're both out on the field, Kwain is going to guarantee you at least 1 life gained a turn, and then Will can give you a 1 mana discount on all of your white and blue spells. There are, of course, many other ways in the deck to gain life that is going to pump that up even further, and you can use that to get to some pretty powerful spells when you're ready to close the game out. We have some mana-heavy spells in here that are intended to be closers. We have things like Glorious Enforcer, which is a 5/5 flying lifelink for 7, 5 and 2 white, where at the beginning of each combat, if you have more life than an opponent, it gains double strike until end of turn. It's a very powerful way to swing for a lot of damage. We also run True Conviction. That is a 6 mana enchantment, 3 and 3 white. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. Another very good way to pump your board up in order to swing for game. And with Will giving you a discount on these potentially, you can get them out a few turns earlier than you might otherwise be able to. So, let's move right along and cover some of our more generalized life gain strategies. We, of course, run several bursts of getting small amounts of life or larger amounts all at once. Creatures like Inspiring Overseer, where we can gain a life and draw a card when it enters. Or a slightly more powerful version of the same effect, where we can gain 2 life and draw 2 cards. We also run Sphinx's Revelation, which allows us to gain X life and X cards by paying in any amount of mana that we wish, and will reduce the cost of that spell by however much life we have already gained that turn as well. It will help pay for the X cost. But what about Kwain himself? Why is he the commander instead of Will? Well, there are a few reasons for that. First and foremost, Kwain hits all of the themes of the deck. He hits the life gain, he hits the card draw, he hits the group hug, and by hitting all 3 of those, he also helps enable the pillow fort strategy. Will does that as well with cost reduction, but Kwain is able to hit every single theme of the deck, rather than just the life gain. Additionally, there are some combos in here that involve Kwain. I, of course, don't mean any game-winning infinite combos. This is a Precon, after all. But let's take a look at a few and see what I mean. First up, we have Smuggler's Share, which is powerful enough on its own even if you aren't feeding it manually. But it reads that at the beginning of each end step, that includes your own, you draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn, and then you create a treasure token for each opponent who had 2 or more lands enter the battlefield under their control this turn. Now, the eagle-eyed among you will notice that Kwain sitting over there allows everyone to draw a card and gain a life. So you've already hit 1 card per turn for each opponent just on Kwain, even if you're activating him on your turn. And there are some other cards in the deck that can have opponents draw cards. After all, there is a bit of a group hug theme here. Cards like Lauren of the Third Path, for example. So with these tools, there are a number of ways of getting Smuggler's Share to go off multiple times in a round. You can get it to activate on your own end step by activating both Kwain and Lauren of the Third Path. That will guarantee that at least one of your opponents has drawn 2 cards. You can spread it out a little bit more by having it activate on 2 different opponents' turns, by activating Kwain on one of their turns after they've already drawn, and Lauren of the Third Path on another player's turn after they've drawn, and keep getting Smuggler's Share triggers off of that. Additionally, as I said earlier, Smuggler's Share can just go off on its own. People like to draw cards in Commander. They like to play multiple lands with fetches sometimes, especially if you're playing higher than Precon power levels with some of the other players on the pod. And then Kwain also pairs well with some of the payoffs that we have in the deck that require us to gain a certain amount of life per turn in order to get a benefit. We have cards like Alinda's Hierophant, Resplendent Angel, and Griffin Airy, all of which want us to be gaining enough life a turn to get their powerful effects. So with all of this life gain and the group hug element giving everyone else cards in life as well, what do we do when we're finally recognized as the threat? Well, that's where our minor Pillow Fort sub-theme comes into play, where we can throw up some walls of various forms to discourage attacks against us or invalidate attacks against us. We, of course, are running a couple of cards like Propaganda and Ghostly Prison, making it mana costly in order to swing at us by having to pay mana for each creature that wants to swing our way. We do run a few pure fog effects like Selfless Squire, which will prevent all damage that would be dealt to us. And additionally, any damage that is prevented that way, Selfless Squire gets that many +1/+1 counters, so they can turn into a bit of a win con for us as well. But we also run cards like Comeuppance that will prevent all damage that would be dealt to us this turn. And if damage from a creature is prevented this way, it'll deal that much damage to that creature. And if damage from a non-creature source is prevented this way, it'll deal that much damage to the source's controller. So once again, this is sort of a sword and shield at the same time. Sure, we're hiding behind the shield, but we are counterattacking whenever we're preventing damage as well. It's a very effective 2-for-1. And in keeping with the theme of being a Precon power level deck, we are running a bunch of tap lands, because of course we are. It's a Precon. Of course, a few of those also gain us life, which plays right into our strategy, so we can deal with it a little bit better than most decks. But we are running those good old tap lands as well. So, all in all, that is a pretty good overview. That's a good tour of the deck. Those are all the highlights, the really splashy cards. So, if you're thinking that this sounds like too strong of a deck, I've actually just shown you all the heaviest hitters we have, and the rest is far more pre-con-y. The whole deck rings in at just under $90 if you were going to buy the pieces individually, which is actually under the value of a modern Precon by quite a fair bit. That's honestly only about half the reprint value that would be in a typical Commander deck nowadays. So really, in terms of like cost-value ratio, I'm under the line for Precon power levels in the modern era by quite a fair margin. But if you want to play this deck, stay true to your conviction, your faith will be rewarded, and your prayers might just be answered with victory. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. If you want to see the deck in full, I will leave a link to the page on Archidect, where I have built it, down in the description. And I will just say, I will see you guys next time. Later.